Nothing is more fun than to be healthy. We take it for granted when we're young. We all love to be young. You know, if you look at a kid, you see how much fun he's having. Well, why is he having fun? Because he's healthy, because he's strong, and because he's vital. So it is fun. Health and talking about health is a fun topic. Why do you think you guys are all here? Why do people spend money to come to these talks? We've forgotten about it. We've forgotten how fun it is to be healthy because we're obsessed with being sick. Do you guys get this?
We're just going to I'll double check that that's on. No.
Yeah?
You checked it before.
Testing? You can hear me, right? You hear in the back? Okay. So it's fun to be healthy, but we're focusing on the being sick. But guess what? No matter how sick you are right now, you're healthy. You're way healthier than you are sick. I don't care if you're dying of stage 4 cancer. All the things that have to work correctly to have you be able to blink an eye or wiggle a finger or think a thought are so incomprehensible, are so mind-boggling. All of the various factors that have to happen congruently and coherently, even if you're laying in your bed and dying, so that you could have enough wherewithal to be conscious that you're laying on your bed and dying. Let alone if you're reasonably healthy and reasonably well. And this is what we want to focus on, and this is what we're going to be talking about here today. How amazing, how incredible the human body is, and how we give it no mind. We pay it no mind. The incredibleness that we are. And this is true about everything in life. We don't pay any attention to how incredible reality is, how incredible it is that we have an iPhone, how incredible it is that we have indoor plumbing, how incredible it is that we can brush our teeth and that things don't rot. 100 years ago, everything rotted. Can you imagine what the world smelled like 100 years ago? Just even 50 years ago, you know the kind of clothes you'd have to wear, the wool clothes, the heavy textiles you'd have to wear. The world has changed so much in so many ways, in so many beneficial ways, and we focus on the crappy stuff. And it's the same thing with how we live inside of our bodies. So first and foremost, honor your body. No matter how sick you may think you are, honor the fact that your heart is working, your kidneys are working, all of the parts of your body are working enough for you to be here. But in order to understand that, in order to really understand that, in order to really appreciate that, we got to break down the body and see what this thing is that's called a body. And because once we do that, it won't be any problem to be in awe. It won't be any problem to be spiritually connected to whatever the divine force is that put all this thing together. I became instantly spiritual when I took Biochemistry 101. The first day when I learned what was going on inside of our bodies at every split second. So let's talk a little bit about the human body. Most of you guys know who I am, correct? Raise your hands if you've heard my radio show. I have a lot of YouTube videos, presentations. So I'm not going to give you my introduction because we don't have a lot of time. But my goal here today is to get you to really be in awe of and in honor of and appreciate your body as it is today, so that you can know how to take care of it with tender, loving care consciously. And when I say consciously, I'm talking about paying attention to the living components of what the body is. See, our bodies are built like raisin bread. We're all raisin bread here, complex raisin bread. When you have raisin bread, you've got two components, right? Right? Yes. Interaction here, you guys, right? Yes, you got two components. What are the two components of raisin bread? Raisin and bread. Clearly, raisins and bread, right? Well, the body is built like raisin bread too. So we don't call the raisins, we don't call the part of the body that's raisins, and we don't call it bread. We call it cells and stuff. That's what the body is. It's made up of cells and stuff. If you can picture that in your head, that's the first step towards staying healthy if you are, or recovering if you're not. If you can picture that your body's built like raisin bread, where the raisins are the cells and the bread is the stuff. Are we good? Yep. Okay. Now, what makes the body magical, raisin bread is great. I love raisin bread, but it's not magical. Our bodies are magical. What makes the body magical is the cells make the stuff. It's like if I had raisins in my hand here, and you looked at the raisins, and then half an hour later, there was a bunch of bread, and it was raisin bread. It was as if the raisins in my hand were extruding bread to make bread. The body is like raisin bread, but it's magic raisin bread. The raisins make the bread. The cells make the stuff. Now, I'm going somewhere here. I'm not just kind of babbling incoherently about raisin bread and cells. I'm going somewhere here if you're healthy or if you're sick. See, when we're sick, where we see the sickness is at the level of the stuff. We can't see the cells. Cells are microscopic. Cells are invisible. What we can see is our skin rotting. Or what we can sense is our joints hurting. We can see the end result, and that's where we're treating. We're working at the medical level and at the health level, at the level of the bread, but the problem is in the raisins. The medical model is an utter and complete failure, F- when it comes to dealing with chronic degenerative diseases, because it's trying to treat the stuff. The stuff is the end result of what's happening at the level of the cells. The problem is at the level of the cell, not the stuff. You see it at the stuff, but the problem is at the cell. Right there in a nutshell is why medicine doesn't work and cannot work. Right there in a nutshell is why we are sick. We are simultaneously the sickest culture and the most doctored culture. Because the doctoring takes place at the level of the stuff, not the cell. But because we can't see the cell, we have no comprehension of this. This is why I said you've got to, if you're going to stay healthy or become healthy, you've got to somehow picture the body as raisin bread, and all the things we hate about it or we're distressed about are bread problems, and the problems are initiated at the level of the raisin. Are you with me? Okay, so we're going to talk about raisins, except we're going to talk about cells, body raisins. So first of all, understand that your body, our bodies, look around and see all these wonderful things called bodies, which are like the most amazing art sculpture ever. Can you imagine if we were all consider ourselves as sculptures? Wouldn't that be amazing? There'd be no ugly people. There'd be everybody, there would be no sick people. Everybody would be the most amazing thing, the most amazing art sculptures, but we're living art sculptures. We're art sculptures that heal and that repair and that grow and they get better over time if we do it correctly. This is beyond magic. I don't even know what word to call it. And all of this magnificence occurs, is begins, is initiated at the level of the cell. The cell is each one of our bodies is composed of 100 trillion or so. Nobody really knows. Of course, the numbers vary from 10 trillion to 100 trillion, but what's a trillion between friends? Right? That's how we think, because a trillion we don't really have a comprehension of a trillion. We don't even have a comprehension of 5,000, really. You ever see those jelly bean counting contests? You look at the jelly beans. There's no way you can come up with that. 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. We lose sense of numbers. Our brain has a little finite area it can work with, very small. We can't picture the really small, we can't picture the really big. So you got to kind of take an intuitive leap. You've got to use your imagination and understand that the body is made up of 100 trillion of something. How long do you think it would take you to count to 100 trillion? If you counted one by one, 1 second at a time. Any guesses? A lifetime? Any guesses? It would take you 320 million years. In that order. That's how big a number we're talking about. And each one of those cells, imagine, just divide your body up to that kind of, again, you have to use your imagination. Take your imagination and divide your body up into that small an area. It's about 1/100th the size of a head of a pin. And take your imagination into that small area and see that little thing that's 1/100th the size of a head of a pin that is responsible for how everything turns out. All the body, the wonderfulness of the human body, all comes from this little tiny thing that's 1/100th the size of a head of a pin. So take yourself down to this thing that's 1/100th the size of a head of a pin, and that's amazing right there. But understand that there's millions of working parts inside that little structure that's 1/100th the size of a head of a pin. Millions of working parts. Oh, it gets better. These millions of working parts are constantly being broken down and rearranged. They're constantly shape-shifting every split second. They're shape-shifting. And this little thing that's 1/100th the size of a head of a pin that you have 100 trillion of has compartments, sub-compartments, little walls. Come on, you guys. It's amazing. Is this not amazing? Now, I could go on and tell you that it's a little battery. It conducts electrical energy, and each one of these little compartments conducts its own electrical energy. I could go tell you that the outside part of a cell, which is 1,000 times thinner than the cell itself, which is already ridiculously small, is a little computer chip that stores information and remembers things. remembers traumas that it had happen to it, interprets the environment it's sitting in. I could tell you that on top of that little membrane that's 1,000 times smaller, thinner than the cell itself, you have another membrane that's 1,000 times smaller than that. And this is like a little forest. If you looked at it close enough with the right detection mechanism, you see a forest of sugar trees sticking out, reading the environment, constantly communicating what's happening in the environment back to the cell. I don't have time to tell you all of the absolute amazing things about this little entity that nobody ever talks about. What I want to get you guys to understand here today is how you can leverage all of this amazingness that's inside the cell, because not only did you not even know it existed, how are you going to take care of it if you don't know it existed? Nobody in here has probably even thought about a cell today. Correct? How can we possibly understand how to leverage this thing if we don't even know it exists and we don't pay it any mind? So my mission here today is to figure out how to leverage this thing. Understand, number one, all disease is cell disease. I don't care if it's multiple sclerosis or Alzheimer's or arthritis or autoimmunity, whatever. If you stand on that booth long enough, you're going to notice something when people come to me and ask me questions. That is, I say the same thing to everybody. We have this idea that there's these magical protocols for multiple sclerosis and for arthritis and for acne and for all these other diseases, but once you understand that all disease is cell disease, you understand all you got to do is figure out how to take care of that cell. And it's as simple as that. The bad news is there's nothing in our standard way of caring for the body that can ever address the health of a cell. The bad news is that if we're expecting to get better by going to the doctor, it isn't going to happen. And there's a reason for that, because there's nothing, if you understand all disease is cell disease, there's nothing in a doctor's magical bag of tricks that will help the cell. Nothing. Not a single drug, not a single device, not a single surgery can help the cell. But all disease is cell disease. Can you see a problem here? All disease is cell disease. That's not an assertion. I don't want you to take my word for it. I want that to compute in your brain, like, logically. There's cells and there's stuff. The cells make the stuff. When we're sick, we see it at the level of the stuff, but the problem begins at the level of cell. That's not me making it up. I don't want you just to believe it because I said it. I want you to pass it through your critical thinking filter and see it make sense to you. All disease is cell disease. So we got to figure out how to be at the level of the cell if we're going to get better. But there's nothing that the doctor can do about it. Oh my gosh, what can we do? We got this incredibly complex entity made up of millions of working parts that are constantly shape-shifting and rearranging, that's packed with hundreds of different compartments, that has a coating on the top that functions like a computer chip that's a memory and a storage device and an information processor. It itself is coded. This thing is so complex. What do we have to do? Well, the bad news is there's nothing that the doctor can do, but here's the good news. The gospel. That means good news. The gospel is that this little entity, this 1/100th the size of a head of a pin, 1/100 trillionth of your human body, doesn't need us. It's on automatic. It's had 3.5 billion years. That's how long these things have been on planet Earth. 3.5 billion years to become perfect, and it is perfect. That little entity that is 1/100th the size of the head of a pin, this 1/100 trillionth of you, is perfect. It repairs on its own. It grows on its own. It thrives and secretes and does all of the things it has to do on its own. It is so intelligent that when it gets sick and it can no longer be repaired, it has a self-destruct mechanism that will kill it. It is so unbelievably perfect that it has its own replacement system, where as it gets older, it divides and it has little babies, and those grow. When they get older, those divide and have little babies, and on and on and on it happens. It's on automatic. It's perfect. Except for 3 little places. It's a cooperative effort. A cell, from your inside of your mouth or from your skin or from your bones, if you put it in a petri dish, it would live perfectly, as long as it had its basic living requirements. It would live perfectly. But when a cell decides to be part of a community, now it's given up something of itself. When a cell has decided to go from being a little tiny independent creature that eats and feeds and reproduces and does everything on its own, which they can do, and decides, you know what, I'm going to be part of a human body, it now gives up some of its independence, and it expects something in return from us. And this is why we're not as sick as we're not as healthy as we should be. It's because we're not giving back in return to the cell. I'm not being poetic, I'm not being rhetorical, I'm being exact and literal. The only reason we're sick is because this perfect little being has given up some of its independence and expects us to provide it with what it needs. And it's not a lot of stuff. It doesn't ask a lot from us. There's only 3 things a cell needs, and if you don't have these 3 things, you're going to be sick. And if you're sick, you don't have one of these 3 things. Now, I should have said this at the beginning, but I'll say it now. All health and all disease, health and wellness, are multidimensional in the sense that there are 4 dimensions of reality: spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. And so that if you're not as healthy as you want to be, or your life is not working in any way, shape, or form as well as you'd like it to be, you've got to address it spiritually first. By spiritual, I'm not talking religious, I'm not talking airy-fairy, I'm just talking about being connected to the universe and not seeing the world as your enemy. When we see the world as our enemy, we activate our immune system and defense system, it shuts down healing, it's a big mess when we see the world as an enemy, and guess what? We're born into that. We're born into seeing feeling separate from the universe, and this creates a sense of fear that's fundamental, and there are those who say there's nothing you can do about it except go back in the womb. And in fact, because that's the last time we didn't have that. In fact, if you get freaked out enough, you'll probably find yourself going back into a fetal position to go back into the womb. Now, I don't want to belabor that point, as fascinating as I find it, and it is extremely important to understand, but you've got to have some kind of spiritual connection to the world, to the universe, to reality, whatever you want to call it. Then you got to be mentally correct. Behind disease, you'll always find poor thinking, as well as you'll find disconnection from spirituality. Poor thinking turns into chemistry via the level of hormones, and at the end of the day, your body will manifest crappy thinking as a crappy body through the action of hormones. Again, I wish I had time to talk about this. You're going to have to just either look it up or trust me on that one. Same with feelings. So our emotions also show up as hormones, which ultimately will show up as a body, and an angry, rageful, jealous, guilt-ridden body or emotion will show up as that version in the body. That having been said, from a physical perspective, there's a lot you can do. In fact, I came up with something I call the 4-fold square of health: nutrition, respiration, movement, and rest. Those are the 4 elements that you need to stay healthy. But shrinking it down to the level of a cell, there's only 3 things we need to do at the level of a cell if we want to stay healthy. And there's only 3 things that go wrong at the level of the cell if we're sick. So let's build up to where we let's review, and then we'll continue. All disease is cell disease. When we see a disease or an illness, or we're not as healthy as we want to be, we're working at the level of the bread, not the raisin. We're working at the level, the secondary level, not the primary level. A cell is perfect. It only needs 3 things. It's given up some of its independence and depends on us. And if you connect all the dots that I just put together, you could see if you're missing these 3 things, you're going to be sick. So you should, if you're sick now, or if you're healthy and you want to stay that way, you should say, what the heck are those 3 things? Right? Right? Are you interested? Yes. Yes? In the back? These are 3 important things. All disease is cell disease. There's only 3 things that go wrong with a cell. We want to know what those 3 things are: starvation, suffocation, toxification. Period. There is no chronic degenerative disease that does not involve starvation, suffocation, and toxification of a level of a cell. When a cell is starved, when it's suffocated, when it's toxic, it will eventually die. It can't do its work. A heart cell will die, a bone cell will die, a brain cell will die when they don't have the food they need, when they don't have the oxygen they need, and when they don't have a clean place to do their work, they'll die. When a cell dies, it explodes. That's how cells die. They don't just die a peaceful death, they explode and they spew their contents all over. And this is not a problem if it happens one time, because the body can clean up those contents. However, if it keeps happening over and over and over again, the body will start to protect itself from these contents, these dead cellular contents, as well as the damaged cells that are the result of the dead cellular contents, and it will build a little beaver's dam around that cell or that group of cells. That Beaver's Dam goes by a very interesting name that everybody in this room has heard, but nobody's ever thought of it like a Beaver's Dam. And it is the source, the immediate source, of all disease mediated by the dead cells. That word starts with an I, inflammation. That's exactly what inflammation is. Inflammation is a Beaver's Dam. Now, when we think of inflammation, we think of something called macroinflammation, which is a black eye or a broken arm or some kind of swelling. And if you have macroinflammation, that's a Beaver's Dam too. But that's a Beaver's Dam around tissue. The Beaver's Dam I'm talking about is a micro Beaver's Dam because we're talking at the micro level. And it's a Beaver's Dam exactly equivalent to a black eye. Exactly equivalent to a shoulder, a bruised shoulder, but microscopically, and it starts to patch up, it starts to surround that poisoned area with the dead cells. That itself creates a barrier to more nutrition, it creates a barrier to more oxygen, it creates a barrier so toxins can't get out, and that area then becomes toxic itself. And so more inflammation happens, and you get more cell death, and more inflammation and more cell death. This is how disease begins. And it starts off very, very, very early. It starts off sometimes in childhood, but because the body's got 100 trillion of these cells and so much area, so much stuff to work with, we don't even notice it. The point is, the problem is at the level of the cell, and it's at the level of how a cell is being fed, how it's being oxygenated, and how toxic it is. So if you want to get healthy, if you've got Alzheimer's or acne, I'm talking about any health challenge, and I'm talking about instantaneously. This is the beauty of the body, is you can instantaneously begin the healing process. Instantaneously, the minute you address these three factors. Now, depending on how broken down you are, it may take a little bit longer to completely turn it around, but the healing process can begin today, this second, if you do it correctly. All disease is cell disease. There's only three things a cell needs. It needs food, it needs oxygen, and a clean place to do its work. So, they're all three important. I could spend hours talking about all three, but in the interest of time, because we don't have a lot, we've got to go a little bit fast. So let's start off with respiration, with oxygen. Oxygen, when I say respiration, I'm talking about oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen is how the body gets its energy. If you're not breathing, a cell will not be able to produce energy, and it will not be able to do its work. So something as simple as deep breathing, I call it SDR breathing, can be go a long way towards helping you begin the healing process and instantaneously feel better. As it turns out, there are pleasure centers that are activated when we breathe correctly. So you'll automatically start to feel better. Even aside from wherever your health challenge is, even if you don't have a health challenge, just practicing SDR breathing will immediately help you feel better. I said SDR. They're all three factors are important. If you do SD and not R, you won't get the benefit. In fact, you can make matters worse if you do SD and not R, or S, R, and not D, or any combination thereof. S for slow, D for deep, R for rhythmic. They're all three important. Slow, deep, rhythmic breathing activates your healing nervous system. In fact, as at the beginning, Goddess Jill so brilliantly said, rub your ears. Rubbing your ears also activates your healing nervous system. So there's lots of ways to do it. A hot shower activates your healing nervous system. You ever notice how you're in the shower and they're beating on the door and you don't want to get out? Right? What is that about? That's a universal thing, right? Can you relate? You're looking for something else to wash and you washed it like 3 times already and now you can wash it again. What is that about? It's when you're in the hot shower, your body is taken back into a place where it was perfectly safe, and that's in the womb. And that's where we're all trying to get back into psychologically. As I said earlier, if you want to activate your healing nervous system, just getting in a fetal position, just telling the body somatically that it's back in the womb will do that. And you'll do it automatically if you get into a situation that's bad enough. A warm bath does it, massage does it. There's so many different ways. SDR breathing does it. You know, it's a really great way to activate the healing nervous system? To accomplish a goal. Accomplishing a goal activates healing chemistry. When we activate healing chemistry, we tell the body it's safe. Any Christians in this room? Anybody know about being saved? That's exactly what that means. It means being safe. It means activating the parasympathetic nervous system. Jesus was a great healer. He didn't talk in healing talk, he talked in parables, but that's what he meant. Activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Oh yeah, love also activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the healing nervous system. Gratitude activates the healing nervous system. That's why you say grace before meals. Again, I wish I could spend hours talking about all this stuff, but I want you to see the power we have once we understand what's happening. Activating the parasympathetic nervous system through SDR breathing can happen quickly and instantly, and if you don't believe me, how many of you guys are on or know somebody who's on an antihypertensive drug, a blood pressure drug? By the way, among the most deadly of all drugs, deadly classes of all drugs, are the antihypertensives. So for those of you who are on antihypertensive, take your blood pressure. You should have a blood pressure cuff, right? Take your blood pressure, get the baseline blood pressure, then practice SDR breathing and take your blood pressure again and watch what happens to your blood pressure. It'll drop like a stone. Because hypertension is a classic, iconic red flag for an activated stress nervous system, and shutting off the blood supply, or shutting off oxygen, is the fastest way to tell the body it's about to die. So SDR breathing is a powerful, powerful healing technique. It feeds the cells the oxygen, helps feed the cells the oxygen that they need. There's more to it than that, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the second section, which is detoxification. The best detoxification there is, at the level of a cell we're talking about, is to not put the toxins in. Now, you say, okay, well, I'm gluten-free. I don't do any toxins. Aside from the fact that drugs, by the way, are toxins, and if you're on a prescription drug, you are on a poison, a toxin, not speaking poetically, speaking literally. There's a toxin that we all eat pretty much voluntarily 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. And we do it for most of the course of our lives, from birth to death. What's that toxin called? Sugar. Everybody knows what that toxin is. So our bodies are seriously, seriously toxic, and the best detox is to stop eating. Because when I talk about detox, I'm talking about detoxing the main part of the body where the life force is located. All disease is cell disease, but all cell disease begins with dirty blood. All disease is cell disease, but all cell disease begins with dirty blood, toxic blood. The blood becomes toxic. Unless you're an IV drug user, there's only one way the blood can be toxic, and that's from food. You know, if you listen to my program, you watch my YouTubes, you come to my presentations, I'm always talking about food, and I'm always talking about digestion. Well, not because I'm a foodie, not because I'm Mr. Organic guy or, you know, some kind of food purist. I'm not. I'm just saying if you're sick, this represents a powerful tool for you, which you can prove to yourself by stopping eating for a day or two. When you stop eating for a day or two, the blood becomes clean and the toxic environment around the cells begins to purify itself. There's other things you need to do. Moving your lymphatic system is very important. Having bowel movements is super important. Using a certain plant nutrients which detoxify are important. You'll have to come to another class where we talk about that because we don't have a lot of time here. The third point to the triad of disease at the level of a cell, starvation, suffocation, inflammation, is nutrition. And that's really what I want to talk about. I'm glad I talked about everything else up until now because it gives you a context. I don't want to be Mr. Nutritionist guy, just take this vitamin, just take that vitamin. That is not how I operate. Nutrition has to occur within a context of health. That context is what we just talked about. That having been said, there's some powerful, powerful tools that you can, nutritional tools that you can use if you're sick, based on the idea that the body is so wonderful and so beautiful, and cells are so divinely responsive and prepared for whatever contingencies may arise, that they're designed to suck up nutrients like a dry sponge sucks up water when they're in a deficiency condition. When your body and cells are in a deficiency state, they become extremely responsive to nutrition, like a plant that hasn't had water that all of a sudden gets watered. You can almost see that plant thriving in front of your eyes if you do it correctly, right? If you left a plant almost right in front of your eyes. The body's like that, but even more responsive. Because it doesn't just need water, it needs a whole bunch of different nutrients. But we don't really understand nutrition. I was upstairs talking to a gal about one of her products, and she was trying to sell me one of her products. She had no clue about what was in that product, and you're going to see that a lot. These are healthcare professionals, or at least people in the healthcare business. Imagine how it is out in the world. There's so much misinformation, and there's so much non-information about nutrition. So what I like to do in my talks is I like to simplify things. Simplification, Albert Einstein said, if you can't say something to a kindergartner, and have them understand it, you didn't understand it yourself. So you've got to be able to, in order to simplify things, you've got to understand things. In order to understand things, you've got to simplify things. So my job for the next 15 minutes, and really my job on the bright side, if you like what we talk about here today, I have a radio program called The Bright Side. It's on every day. And then I have a lot of YouTubes, and I talk about this kind of stuff literally every day. And I have 7 years worth of archives that are all free. So we got to understand this, cut to the chase, simplify nutrition. All of nutrition can be simplified in what I call the 8 chapters of good nutrition. The 8 chapters of good nutrition start off with, are based in 2 sections. One section is called macro, meaning big, macronutrition. The other section would be called micronutrition, small nutrition. Macronutrition, micronutrition. Macronutrition is raw energy. It's like a fire. And everything I'm talking about when I say talk about fires and I'm talking about cells using oxygen and using nutrients, I'm really talking at the very tiniest level. So yes, it's a burning type of reaction that occurs for a cell to get energy, but it's quantum burning. And don't be put off by the word quantum, but that's literally what's happening at the level of the cell. It's happening at, if you ever heard that term quantum physics, quantum electrodynamics, what we're really talking about here is quantum chemistry, because the cell is turning that macronutrient, that hamburger, that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that chicken, into stuff at the quantum level. What is the name of the system that turns the hamburger into quantum nutrients for a cell? Digestion. And this is why digestion is so important, because it's the digestive system that turns your meal into you. Think about it. How did yesterday's lunch become your arm? Hello, is that a miracle? What the heck just happened there? Yesterday's lunch gets turned into our arm via the level, via the digestive system, and then ultimately at the quantum level. Macronutrients provide the energy for that. Protein, fats, carbohydrates. You could probably throw fiber and water into the mix, but for the most part, the bulk of our macronutrients are protein, fats, and carbohydrates. Those get turned into energy. So the cell can have energy to do what it needs to do. However, in chemistry and at the level of the cells, energy is really dangerous. It can burn things. Even at our level, if you stick your finger in an electrical socket, that's not a good thing, because that's lots of energy, and in the body, energy has to be directed correctly. You can't just have chaotic energy. In fact, if you just put chaotic energy into the body will figure out a way to stash that chaotic energy away. Do you know what we call that storage system for all that chaotic energy from all that protein and all that fat and all that carbohydrates? What's the name for that? We call it our fat butts. That's what our fat butts are, is all that energy from the protein and fats and the carbohydrates that just come into the body. Body can't handle all that energy. It doesn't like all that energy. What it does is, it needs is a way to channel that energy directly into the right chemistry. Raw energy comes in the form of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, macronutrition. It comes into the cell. Now the cell has to figure out a way to channel that energy into the correct chemistry, into making collagen, into making the heart beat, into creating different compartments for different subcomponents for the cell. Do you know what we call the magical pixie dust that directs the energy into the right chemistry? Micronutrients. That's what the vitamins and the minerals are supposed to do. The vitamins and the minerals are supposed to take that energy that's coming in from the protein and the fats and the carbohydrates and shunt it, direct it into the right chemistry. Do you know what we call a food that has just the amount of protein, fat, and carbohydrate with the micronutrients perfectly balanced? What do we call that? We call that a whole food. A whole food is a food that has a perfect balance of macros to micros. Do you know what we call a food that has lots of macros but no micros? Junk food. Literally, that's the meaning of junk food. It's a food that has lots of the macros but none of the micros. Dr. Wallach, you guys all know who Dr. Wallach is, his brilliant insight, his genius insight back in the 1940s was that if you don't have the micronutrients, the body can't use the macronutrients. If you don't have the micronutrients, you're not going to be able to direct the energy that you're getting from the macronutrients into the right chemistry. This is why we are the starving obese. We're starving to death, functionally, But you wouldn't know it because we've got lots of the calories, lots of the energy coming in. Throughout history, most starvation was based in the macros, not in the micros. In the last 100 years, we switched it around. In the last couple hundred years, we switched it around. So now our starvation is based on the micros, and this is why micronutrient supplementation is so incredibly important, why it is so valuable, and why almost every single health challenge that you can name will begin to reverse itself once you change that state. I say almost, it will happen always, but for the rare person who's getting enough micros, they're not going to notice a big difference. But for most of us in this room who are not getting the micros, you start putting the micros into your system, you'll notice that you're full faster. One of the first things that happens to people on a micronutrient supplement program is they lose weight. It's the best weight loss strategy there is because now your body can use the macronutrients. The micronutrients are the first thing that the body senses as deficient for most of us. So you get that plant effect where the body will suck up nutrients like a dry sponge sucks up water quickly on a micronutrient supplement program. So how do you get on a micronutrient supplement program? Well, there's two major types of micronutrients. We call them vitamins and we call them minerals. The vitamins come in two varieties. You've got water-soluble vitamins. Those are vitamins that you pee out and that are absorbed very quickly, the B complex and vitamin C. Deficiencies here are incredibly, incredibly significant because most of us are peeing regularly and most of us are drinking water regularly, but most of us are not replacing the B complex and the vitamin C. And one of the classic signs of B complex and vitamin C deficiency is something called heart disease. Another classic sign of B vitamin and vitamin C deficiency is cancer. Another sign of B vitamin and vitamin C deficiency is blood sugar problems, and these are the three biggest causes of death in the United States and in Canada. It could very well be that our deficiency in the water-soluble vitamins and water-soluble minerals, for that matter, which we call electrolytes, is behind numerous health challenges. And when you understand the link between the two and health, it makes sense that if you're not getting them, that you're going to have a connection between deficiency states at the water-soluble level and disease. The water-soluble nutrients are easy to replace. We have a product called Beyond Tangy Tangerine. Almost everybody who uses it knows exactly what I'm talking about. The health benefits associated with Beyond Tangy Tangerine. This is what Dr. Walk did. He said, okay, we're missing these water-soluble nutrients. Let's put them in a powder so you can drink it. So you can get water-soluble nutrients from vegetable juices, and that's why vegetable juices are so important. There's lots of other ways, but Beyond Tangy Tangerine is a wonderful way because it provides you a dense amount of them, more than you'll get in any foods. The next group of vitamins is the fatty vitamins, vitamins D, E, A, and K. These are your growth vitamins. Your water-soluble vitamins provide electrical energy, quick sparks, like for the heart and for the brain and for the blood sugar system. The fat-soluble nutrients help you grow and repair. If you've had a gallbladder taken out, if you have a digestive problem, if you have messed up gut bacteria, you won't be able to absorb your fatty repairing vitamins. So getting on a vitamin program that supplies your fatty vitamins, vitamins D, E, A, and K, the best way to get vitamin D, by the way, is the sun. And don't let anybody fool you into thinking that the sun is not extremely important and valuable. And then the next class of micronutrients are the minerals. The minerals have several roles to play. Number one, they're the building blocks. They help build the body. The body is built up of these minerals, at least at the level that we call elements or atoms. You know, most of our body is made up of 6 different elements. 95, 98% of the body is made up of 6 minerals, if you will, or elements. A mineral, I should tell you this, there's so much confusion about minerals. A mineral is technically a bunch of elements stuck together. An essential mineral is a mineral that has been purified. That's just one kind of mineral. Like a rock is a mineral. Minerals are made up of a bunch of different elements. But if you want to get nutritionally speaking, there's 60 essential minerals that you have to have. And they're almost impossible to get from your food. The 60 essential minerals that you need have to be supplemented. If anybody tries to tell you they're getting everything they need from food, it's not going to happen. Number one, the soils are all depleted. Number two, we have no idea how much of a mineral is in a particular area of soil. And even if you're trying to eat your broccoli and get all your minerals by eating your vegetables, we have no idea what's actually in that broccoli. Again, this is why you will notice a quick difference when you supplement with minerals. When you're supplementing with minerals, it's always in your interest to use liquid minerals. In fact, it's always in your interest to do liquids. There's a very interest in general, But with minerals, there's a very interesting chemical reaction that occurs when water interacts with minerals. An electrical effect is generated, and if you drink your minerals, you will be drinking electricity. I wish I had more time, you guys, but this is basically what we're talking about here today. All disease is cell disease. No matter what your health challenge is, think of it as a cellular health challenge. Then the question only becomes, how do I get my cells healthy again? Well, what is it that causes cells to break down? Only three things. Only three things. And there's nothing a medical professional can do to help you with those three things, but we can do it ourselves. Starvation, suffocation, toxification. Practice SDR breathing as often as you can. Focus on your breath as much as possible. Make sure that you're eliminating toxicity. Drugs are toxic. A lot of things are toxic. Water is toxic. Sugar is a voluntary toxin that we all enjoy multiple times a day. Stay away from sugar. And get yourself on a micronutrient supplement program. We're at booth 130, 131. We can give you the details. Thank you very, very much. And listen to the bright side every day. 7 years of archives.